Say anything you don't want on YouTube later. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's Wednesday. It is class 2 for our Group Gap training cohort. Thank you guys for being so timely. I am going to start moving slowly through the first couple of slides here, and hopefully more people will join us as they can. Couple reminders, you did have homework from class 1. It is on Google Classroom. If you haven't accepted your invitation yet, make sure that you do that and then get in there and complete your homework. There are a couple homeworks for the first couple of classes, and it's just a way for us to preliminarily gather information from you so that we can start to build out your farm food safety plan and some of your other documents that will be required. So please do those. Don't get too far behind. We all know what that procrastinating habit is like later. It's not so good. Today, we're going to talk about, at the beginning, the group gap structure. So how is group gap a little bit different from regular gap? How is the program structured and how does it work? And then we're going to do a little bit of a dive into Heavy Connect and record keeping, which is very, very important. We kind of tried to stress that in the first class. There's a lot of things that we can do for you guys as we go through this process of getting you ready for certification, but the record keeping is the one thing we can't do for you. So that is really your kuleana. You have to make sure that that gets done. And today, instead of Ingrid, Chess is here with us. Chess is our food safety director, and she has been with us since she was an intern, and she's very well versed in Heavy Connect. So she's going to talk about the record keeping, and I'm going to kick it off today going through the group gap structure. So I think a couple more people have entered. So we're going to go ahead and start on today's presentation. If you do have questions, please hold them or put them in the chat, especially once we get to Heavy Connect record keeping. We can address those questions as we go between, we'll talk about the Heavy Connect record keeping on the phone or the app, and then also on the dashboard. So feel free to put your questions in the chat so that we can see them and answer them at the appropriate time. We're going to start today by talking about the group gap structure. And we talked a little bit about group gap and how it's different than regular gap in our first class. If you remember, group gap allows a whole bunch of farmers to work together. It can also be food hubs, marketing associations, lots of different entities. But essentially, the program is run by an admin team. And so in our structure, we have an admin team that is made up of some folks here from Hawaii. It's me and Chess and our chairperson of the board as well, Kevin Kelly. We also are joined on our admin team by folks from a couple other states. And that's because our group gap structure is actually a big umbrella. We work with not only you folks here in Hawaii farmers, but we work with organizations and farmer groups across the country. There are about 7 states represented in our big umbrella. So we have some admin team members who are technical assistance providers and or auditors who work in those other states. And primarily that's Utah and New Mexico. Underneath of the admin team, we have the group admin, and that's the person who basically is responsible for all the documentation. Currently, that's me, and eventually that may change, but for now, we take care of the documentation for all of the farms in our group gap group. It's not just Hawaii farms in our group. There's actually about probably 40 or so farms on the mainland as well. And those are our group members. So you'll see the next little box down here in that third level, group members, that's you guys. So all of our farmers are the group members. One day, we may have here in Hawaii some food hubs involved. The folks on the mainland, some of the New Mexico operations are actually food hubs and aggregators as well. Also, we have internal QMS auditors. This is going to make a little more sense a little bit later, but we have a system by which we operate, and it's called our quality management system. That system, the set of procedures that we use to do our work, is actually audited. It has to be audited once a year by an internal auditor, which means someone that we choose. And so that person is represented We currently work with someone who is also on the mainland, but she's been doing these internal QMS audits for a long time. And then finally, we have internal producer auditors. You might remember from our first class, we talked about the fact that all of the farms in our group receive an internal audit once a year, at least from us. And that is done by folks on our team. We are all trained to do those audits. And in our GroupGAP program, we also have internal producer auditors who are on the mainland. So when time allows and the situation works out, it's possible that they may also perform an audit for folks in Hawaii if they are able to be in state, or if it's a remote audit, we sometimes share that responsibility. It allows us to get a look at other operations and vice versa. And we strengthen our membership and our program by doing that. So just to give you a sense of what the program structure looks like, and this will probably make a little more sense as we go a little bit further into this. So I mentioned our procedures, and we define those with the term QMS. A QMS is a quality management system, which is essentially one big, huge document or set of documents that describes how we deliver our work. What do we do, the processes that we use, the procedures that we follow, and who's responsible for those things within our structure. So our program, as I mentioned, is managed by the Farmers Group. That's sort of the big umbrella organization. And the Farmers Group has a QMS that outlines how we will do what we do. Included in that QMS is our member list. So when you guys join the program, one of the things that we'll send you is a link to what is called a new member intake form. We will ask you to fill that out. And that information goes into a data table that is eventually supplied to the USDA. So they see who are our members. It just gives basic information, a little bit about yourself, where you are, your operation, how big is it, what are your commodities. In the QMS, we also have, of course, our procedures for how we do what we do. In our case here in Hawaii, we provide a lot of training to you folks. Some of the organizations in our umbrella, they do some training, although not as formal as what we do. And we also explain in our QMS how we audit. So how do we determine whether or not members in our operation, in our group, are meeting compliance? What do we do if they are meeting compliance? What do we do if they're not? How do we document that? So we'll go through that very generally today so that you guys have a good understanding of what is the process and how will we handle these different situations. So a lot of times after we do this, people are kind of like, wow, that was a lot. Why do you have this? Why is it written out? And the first thing to say is that the QMS is required. USDA requires a GroupGAP program to outline all of their procedures. For one thing, it's really important for us to have a sense of this is the steps we're going to take to accomplish what we need to do. Another reason is that allows comparison. We can compare ourselves, what we are doing, to what we've established as our steps. And it also allows USDA to compare what we said we're going to do with what we're doing. In our case, our QMS is very specific, and it says that we will work with two USDA standards, Harmonized GAP and Harmonized GAP Plus. There are a lot of other GAP standards out there, which we spoke about in our first class. But as far as our QMS and the work that we do, we only focus on Harmonized GAP and Harmonized GAP Plus. And the QMS is also really important because it provides a way for us to have a schedule on circling back and looking at how we're doing. So in our case, in our QMS, we have an internal QMS audit once a year. And we also have basically a review, an agenda that's a management review once a year. So that provides us with a specific time and requirement to ensure that we sit down and look at, are we meeting your needs as our customers? Who are our other customers? For example, Department of Agriculture, USDA, are we meeting their needs as well? So it's kind of a way for us to monitor our own work, and also provides a way for USDA to monitor our work as well. So within the QMS, one of the other things that we have to outline is a quality policy. What is our goal? The farmers group has a very specific quality policy, and that is that we want to build vitality in local and regional food systems through dynamic collaboration on food safety and quality. So what that means really is that we're really dedicated to food safety. That's our wheelhouse. That's what we do. We try not to drift out into other things. But to accomplish that, we have to set out some objectives. And these are objectives that when USDA reviews our QMS, they're looking for something that is measurable. So first thing, number one thing is successful GroupGAP certification of all participating members in our program. So that is our promise to you as our customer. We want to get you certified. That is our goal, and hopefully your goal as well. Second objective, new and or increased market opportunities for participating members. One of the reasons that we're really so passionate about this work is that we want to see small farmers succeed and get market access. And we believe that food safety certification is a great way to do that, maybe one of the most important ways to do that. Third quality objective is a clear plan for implementation for groups wishing to follow. So this means that we have a clear set of procedures for members in our program, like yourselves, and also that we have a pretty solid set of procedures for other folks who might want to take this same work up. If they want to create their own GroupGAP group, follow our success, follow this model. So those are our quality objectives, definitely things that are measurable. We can tell whether or not we're succeeding at any one of these by putting it into practice. And so just keep those in mind as we go through this program, especially number one, we really want to make sure that you guys get certified. So that is our goal. We're going to drive towards that, and hopefully we're all going to be on the same page getting there. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. One of the things that we do have to explain in our QMS is about auditing and how our records or documentation will be handled. So the first thing, we talked about this last time as well, in our GroupGAP policy, it is stated that each operation has 2 internal audits a year. One is announced and one is unannounced. Sometimes people ask, why do we have to have 2? And the reason for that in Hawaii in particular is because we have a year-round growing season. So just doing one internal audit is not enough of a touch point when you're growing year-round. That audit is just one snapshot in time. So we do make sure that we do a second. That second one may be what we call an unannounced audit, which means that it might be remote or it might be a follow-up audit if you had your first audit and you had some things that you needed to correct. The internal audits are performed by trained staff. And in our group, that's all of us on our food safety team, myself, Chess, and Ingrid and Dea, our food safety specialists. What that means is that we have attended USDA auditor training, just like a regular USDA auditor. We had to do the homework. We had to pass the test. We've also attended the Produce Safety Alliance grower training course. So that is the FSMA basic course. If you guys haven't taken that, you should look into taking that as well. That's a requirement. Also, to do auditor training for USDA, there are a couple of prerequisite courses that you have to take. And throughout the year, we also have to maintain a certain amount of hours of continuing education. And again, this is all specific to the harmonized GAP and GAP Plus standards. So another reason that that's all we handle in our QMS is because that's what we're trained to audit in. We don't audit mushroom GAP or tomato GAP or any of the other standards that are out there. And all that is to say that when we're hounding you guys about audits, it's because we've been trained to do that, and we have to make sure that we are holding up that standard. So as we go through this process with you, you guys will have internal audits every year. One will be done with us. Your unannounced or remote audit will also likely be done with us. In some cases, like I said, we may have another auditor from the mainland do it if it's remote. But all of those internal audit records are going to be available to USDA to review. So that is part of the process. That is where really they have oversight, making sure that we are following the procedures and we're auditing to the same standard that they would be. They review those audits. In the end, after everyone in our group has had their internal audits for the year, USDA will review those and they will choose a subset number of our total number in the group. And those are the operations that will have a USDA third-party audit. That means that the audit will be performed by someone either from USDA or Hawaii Department of Agriculture. The reason that they do it that way is that's the mechanism of GroupGAP. The more people you have or the more operations you have in the GroupGAP group, the better it is, because the subset number that USDA uses is the square root of the total number of farms in the group. So if we reach 100 farms in our group, only 10 farms are going to be audited by USDA. And that's really where the cost savings and benefit come, because it's a much smaller number when you look at the cost of auditing 10 farms versus 100 farms. So a couple things about how this works in the group setting. Passing the audit means that the GAP certification for the group is maintained. So each individual operation, you will have your internal audit. You want to pass that, or if you have corrective actions, you want to fix those and pass your follow-up audit. Sometimes, though, we have operations that don't pass an audit. And so the question always comes up, well, what happens then? So if you don't pass an audit, whether it's internal or external, that means that you're going to have to document your corrective actions. So the auditor will provide you with some information about what you missed, what was the compliance criteria that you didn't meet. And then you, as the operation, will have the opportunity to decide how you want to fix that and when. Our job then, as technical assistance providers to you, is to help you with that. So we will be on hand to make that happen and make it make sense. So if an audit occurs and you fail, that's okay. It doesn't mean that the whole group fails. Everyone else who has a pass, they get their certification. If you are an operation that had a fail and you have corrective actions to make, we just hold your certification until those corrective actions are done and reviewed, and we know that you meet criteria. So it's pretty simple. Failing an audit is kind of expected too. It will happen at least some point in time. Most of the time, it's small documentation type stuff. So as I said, it doesn't cause the entire group to fail. It's just something that occasionally will happen to an individual operation. You have time to correct those issues. You will do that by filling out that documentation that's called the corrective action report. So again, that's something that you guys will be eventually ready to do once you have your first internal audit. Anything that doesn't meet compliance, we'll be looking to help you correct that. And again, that determination of what you will do and when it will be done by is for you to decide. We like to mention this because it's important to remember that an audit is just a snapshot in time, as we said. Sometimes maybe you don't have all your documentation in order. There's going to be something that you miss. That's okay. It's not something to be afraid of. It's an opportunity for us to learn. So, all right. So if you do fail the audit, we kind of talked over this a little bit already, but you have to do your corrective action. We will schedule a follow-up audit to ensure that you do have a correction that meets criteria. So you will decide what your deadline date is for those corrections. After that date, we will schedule that follow-up audit with you. And we will fill out the report. If it's something that requires an observation, we'll schedule a time to come back out to the farm. If it's documentation-based, that might be something we can review just at a desk audit by looking through your paperwork. Then we won't come back out to the farm necessarily to do that. Anything that is what's called a non-mandatory doesn't have to be done immediately. That's something that can be done and wait till your next scheduled audit. But if you have what's called a mandatory missed criteria, that's an immediate, something that has to be taken care of immediately. So those are just some things to keep in mind. They'll make a little bit more sense later on as we start to talk about which criteria are mandatory and which are not. But just keeping it in mind, the mandatory ones are the ones we're going to focus on first. And one thing to mention, part of our QMS does deal with what happens when we have operations that repeatedly fail audits. That typically doesn't happen, but occasionally there's a reason why an operation may not be very good at keeping records, not able to maintain certain standards. If that happens, we will take action with the operation, and eventually, if needed, we will ask them to leave the group. And that is because we want to make sure that the integrity of our standards are maintained. We don't want to have operations in our group that refuse to meet the same compliance standards as everyone else is meeting. So when that occurs, we do have a procedure to deal with that. We will ask folks to leave the group if they don't want to keep up, basically. And then before I hand it over to Chess, I just wanted to touch on aquaponics gap. This is something that is important for some of our operations in Hawaii, especially aquaponics is a growing industry. And a few years ago, USDA recognized that it was, and not just here, but around the country as well. And they wanted to create a set of standards that address aquaponics in particular. They ran a pilot, which one or two of our farms participated in, and then they set their standards based on that pilot. So for aquaponics, there are a few things that are just a little bit different than for conventional farms. One thing to note, how you're packaging your crop. If you're keeping the root systems packaged with your crop, you're not cutting that off and packaging it, you absolutely have to be able to show that the water that your crop is growing in does not have detectable E. coli. So kind of a simple thing, but just keeping that in mind, that is a little bit something different to make mention of. Also with aquaponics gap, there is a higher level of water testing. So you will have to do water testing more frequently. A couple other things to go over for aquaponics gap related to your records. You need to make sure that you have very good supporting documents if you are doing any kind of water sanitization. So again, as you're looking at your system, if you have an aquaponics system, will help you determine whether or not that's necessary, but you will want to have solid records for that sanitizing. As I just mentioned, the water has to undergo a higher level of testing. It's monthly. So you take your water samples every month instead of a different frequency on conventional farms. That would be taken after your fish tanks if you have fish in your system, and you will have a similar situation as the conventional farms with respect to you'll have to show your sample results and you'll have to have a written testing procedure, which we can help you with. The other thing to note for aquaponics is included in your farm food safety plan. We'll want to make sure that we have SOPs that talk about how we're preventing any cross-contamination from fish areas to crop or packaging or wash pack areas. So that's a key piece, little bit different in conventional operations because this is just an added step, but just a couple things to keep in mind if you do have an aquaponics operation or you're considering adding that to your operation and getting it certified, just keeping these things in mind. And I think now I'm going to hand it over to Chess, and she's going to talk about records and give you guys a pretty comprehensive overview of Heavy Connect.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk through Heavy Connect stuff today. I know that last time there were some issues with the screen sharing, so hopefully I'll be able to screencast my actual Heavy Connect app and walk through a few of the records with you guys. If you haven't already received your Heavy Connect login information from us, you should receive that by the end of today, but I'm pretty sure most folks have already received their login information. One thing to note with that is your accounts right now are super basic. So there's just really the template records that we have created as we work through your homeworks and go through a risk assessment, gathering more information about your operation. We'll be able to customize these records more and work with you to make them fit your specific operation. But just starting off with reasons why it's important to keep these records. So really without a robust and comprehensive record system, an audit is not possible. So to complete a harmonized gap or harmonized gap plus audit, the auditor wants to see around 3 months of consistent records. So that's why we really want you guys to start now. So when that 3 month marks hit, you guys will be ready for an internal audit and we can keep the audit cycle on time and get you guys certified, hopefully within the year. So without these records, the auditor really just is going off that one day that they're on your farm. So having those 3 months of additional records shows that you're keeping up with these practices on a daily basis. One really important thing to note here is that records should be completed by someone who's physically present on the farm. We want records to be accurate and timely. So having someone who's physically there, observing the harvest or taking part of the harvest, completing, for example, the harvest log is really important. It shouldn't be someone who's stationed only in the office, who's completing field assessment logs, for example. It should be someone who's physically present on the farm in the field, observing these things in real time. Another important thing to note here, along with being physically present on the farm, although it can be tempting to kind of say, I'll do it later, and then Friday rolls around and you fill in all your records for the week. That's really not best practice. Records, each day your farm is open and operating, there should be some sort of record, whether that's, okay, I just did a restroom cleaning log today, my farm was open. Maybe I didn't harvest, I don't need a harvest log, but each day the farm is open and operating, there should be some form of record and they should be completed as close to the actual task occurring as possible. So definitely understandable. Sometimes you harvest, forget to do the harvest log, later that night you fill it in, but it shouldn't be a backlog where you're doing Monday's records on Friday. Should be happening close to the time of the activity. The great thing about Heavy Connect is it allows us at North Shore EVP to monitor kind of how you guys are using the app and how consistent you guys are being. So each Monday, our food safety team receives what's called looker reports. And this just gives us an overview of how you've been using the app for the week. If there's no reports that week, it'll be a blank report and we'll know, okay, maybe I need to reach out to this operation and see, were they just not on the farm this week? Did they have issues with the app? Is something not working? Or do they just need a reminder? So you can expect each week if we get a blank report that we're going to reach out to you and ask what's going on. And we'll work with you to resolve whatever that issue is. Another thing that the looker reports do is it flags certain answers for attention. So for example, if I indicate on my harvest report that I left my harvest bins on the ground or there was some sort of animal contamination on my harvest bins or on my product, the app will automatically flag that report for attention and prompt you as the person filling out the report to go in and put some additional information. So put a corrective action or explain the situation more. If you don't do that, then we will go in later as your food safety team and either help you come up with a corrective action if you haven't already, or just prompt you to, oh, hey, you forgot to say what you did about this contamination issue, or you forgot to note that you discarded product that was contaminated with animal tracks or whatever it is. So that's a great thing about Heavy Connect. The other great thing is that it automatically organizes and stores your records indefinitely. So for Harmonized Gap and Harmonized Gap Plus, records are required to be kept for a 2-year period at minimum. So you can imagine when these are all paper records, 2 years worth of paper records gets pretty hefty. So Heavy Connect it all being digital is a really big saver and stress reducer. You don't have to worry where your records are. They're stored on the cloud. And then lastly, records, they're required for harmonized GAP and harmonized GAP plus, but they're also useful for other programs or services you might be interested in. So for example, if you're interested in looking into a farm service agency loan or an NRCS reimbursement program or food safety reimbursement, sometimes these different loans and programs ask for records or ask for data points that you can pull from your records. And another reason is they can help you with achieving other certifications. So organic certification, for example, does require a fair amount of record keeping. There's some overlap with organic certification and the harmonized standard. So you can kind of kill two birds with one stone there. And it also just helps you build in that habit of record keeping. So if eventually I want to go for an organic certification or some other sort of certification with record keeping requirements, I already have that habit and some baseline of records built up. So for records, going into what specific records you guys are going to need to keep. There are a fair amount of records that you'll see on your account. One thing to note is frequency for these records are all kind of different, and in some cases depend on your operation's specific practices. So, for example, if I'm a farm that only harvests once a week, I'm not going to be expected to complete a harvest log every single day. So while the list might seem pretty long, based on your operations practices, how often you guys are open and operating will depend on how frequent you actually have to keep these records. There are a few that we do want you guys to keep on a daily basis when the farm is open. So the first one being daily GAP and your restroom cleaning log. These are two records that we kind of combined. The restroom cleaning log obviously goes over that your restroom is in working condition, that you have paper towels, soap, things are clean and tidy. And that's combined with the daily GAP log, which really just does a quick overview of all the things at your farm that have to do with good ag practices. So just checking really quick, okay, is today a harvest day? Did I apply pesticides or fertilizers today? It's a good reminder of, okay, if I did this, I need to make sure I go in and fill out a pesticide application log or fill out my harvest log. These are all records here on this first page of records that apply to the general scope of the audit. And all farms that or operations that go through a harmonized GAP or harmonized GAP plus audit have to complete the general scope. So these are records that across the board folks will be filling out. Also in these categories is the harvest log, as I mentioned, a visitor log, dangerous incident log, mock recall and traceability, which is an annual requirement at minimum. And it's really just an exercise to show and document that whatever traceability program and recall program that your operation has, it shows that, okay, this is effective and I need to document its effectiveness on an annual basis. Employee training is another one that's applicable, so record as the activities take place. And then these last two, greenhouse inspection log, this is one that will only apply to your operation if you're an indoor growing operation or you have greenhouses on site. So this is one that we will share with your operations account only if you have a greenhouse. And then lastly, the farm updates log. This is not one of the harmonized GAP or plus harmonized GAP plus requirements, but it's just a way to quickly communicate changes at your operation with the North Shore EVP team. So of course you can email or text us or however you want to communicate when you have updates to your operation. Another way you can do it though is the farm updates log. And this is just a good way to send whichever updates you have on your farm. Maybe that's you're implementing a new pesticide treatment program, or you are adding a new porta potty to your site, or opening up a new growing field and need to update your map. This will prompt us to reach out to you for more information or make sure we have all the information we need in the actual log. For the field scope, this is field operations and harvesting. So for all farms that grow and produce, this is the second scope that you guys will be completing. For folks like if you're a food hub, for example, you would skip over this scope and do the general and post-harvest scope. But all the guys here in this cohort, I believe, are production farms. So you will all be completing the field operations and harvesting scope. Here, again, a lot of the records are when applicable, so complete them when you actually apply pesticide or apply fertilizer. One that we do want to see each day when your operation is open and active is a cleaning and sanitizing log. So whether that's, okay, I just cleaned some harvest bins or cleaned some tools, or I cleaned and sanitized several food contact surfaces, that you should document. The water delivery system assessment, this is something that is based on an individual operations farm food safety plan and your standard operating procedures. So it's really looking at how water is distributed throughout your farm, whether that's maybe you have overhead irrigation or maybe you have drip irrigation. Just checking that there's no breaks or leaks in the pipe. If you have water holding tanks on your farm, making sure that those are maintained, cleaned, and sanitized at an appropriate frequency. But this is one that kind of depends on your operation, both your method of irrigation and also what your water source is. And we can work with you to figure out what frequency makes sense for your farm. The two ones down here, again, are ones that we'll share with you if it's applicable to your operation. So if you're a farm that's making your own manure compost on site, we have a manure compost extraction log for you to record things like temperature of your compost pile, how often you're turning it, and the length of time that you're letting it sit to cure. And then the manure application log, if you are applying animal manure to your fields and your production areas, you'll want to record that as well. So as you start exploring Heavy Connect, if there's records that are missing, maybe I am a farm that's applying manure compost or making my own compost on site, make sure you reach out to one of the food safety specialists and let them know, oh, this is a practice that I'm doing. I need somewhere to record it. And then lastly is our post-harvest scope. So this is a scope that we typically don't push towards people. If you are someone who's field packing or doing very limited post-harvest activities, maybe you're not washing your product, you're just packing it up right there on site, the post-harvest scope is not something you need to worry about. We also typically try to get operations in the first year at least through the general and field scope, get them certified there. And then depending on their needs, maybe a specific market is asking for the post-harvest scope specifically, or the operation has extensive post-harvest practices. This is something that we can work with you on. So there are a lot of additional records for the post-harvest scope. And so that's why we typically, unless it's an operation that really needs it specifically, try to just go through the field and general sections of the audit for the first year. So for post-harvest scope, there's a few calibration records, scale calibration and thermometer calibration for walk-in coolers or fridges, and scale calibration for weighing your product. There's also recording temperature of your refrigerator, monitoring packaging and other materials that are coming onto your farm to ensure that they are food safe packaging and meeting your criteria. Post-harvest wash water, if you are adding any sanitizers or other products to a wash water in the post-harvest section, that will need to be recorded to make sure it's the proper amounts. And then post-harvest building, general maintenance and pest control. So if you do have a post-harvest facility, this is just a record where you can document any maintenance, record pest control. For example, if you have bait stations, documenting that you're monitoring those bait stations and keeping things clean and tidy in your post-harvest building. Right now, the only two scopes that you should see on your account are the general and the field scope. So you won't have these post-harvest records shared with you yet. If the post-harvest scope is something you're really interested in or think that you need, we can talk with you individually and work on adding that to your account and adding on the other necessary documentation that you'll need. So now I'm going to switch over to my iPad and do a demo of Heavy Connect, the actual app where you input the information. So I'm going to switch over my screen sharing. If you guys have questions during this time, please put them in the chat or wait till the end of this little demo section and I can answer them while I still have my app up. That way, I can kind of show you what I'm talking about as I do it. Awesome. Yay, it's working. So here I am in the app. This is what you will see when you log on. So I'm in just an example account right now. When you log on to your account, this is what it will look like. So we've provided you with a username, a password, and then this last one is your company ID. So you'll log on, this is what the logon page looks like. And when you enter into the account, this is what you'll see. When I go to this sidebar menu here, this is where I can see the general scope logs, the field scopes logs, a to-do list, which I can explain later. But the main things that you'll want to know for starting off is this top left-hand corner is where I can scroll through my different records. So starting off with the general scope, here you can see I already completed a record. Ooh, Siri's listening to me. On this first page is where you'll see records that you've already completed. So you can, when you log in, this will be blank. Here's a record that was completed on February 11th. But when I want to start up a new report, I go down to this green plus button here, and this is where I can see the records to select from. So, for example, starting off with this daily GAP and restroom cleaning log, the first thing that I can do is select my location. So I can add a grower. For example, here I'll just be Chess Farm. It's not letting me add it, so I'll just be Ho Farms for now. And then I can indicate a specific field if I need to. I can also just skip this section altogether. So for the daily GAP and restroom cleaning checklist, it's pretty general, so I don't need to like specify a specific location. I can add any details here. And then if you do give your app permission to track your GPS location, it'll automatically record your coordinates of where you're filling out the report. This isn't mandatory though, so in settings of whichever iPad or phone you're using to record, you can disable that so it won't record your actual location. So for the daily GAP and restroom cleaning checklist, again, it's just some basic yes or no questions for the most part. So for field safety, it's just going through whether or not animal presence is observed. I can say no, and then you'll see on the left-hand side, that is the correct or good answer. So pops up green little bar on the left-hand side. If I hit yes, an orange bar will appear saying, okay, this is flagged for attention. So this is where if I hit yes here in the looker reports at the end of the week, one of the North Shore EVP team will come and be like, oh, you hit yes, there was animal presence observed, print, species, or a live animal. Did you do anything about that? Or was it a mistake? Or what was it? So if I do hit yes, I can hit this little paper icon to kind of explain what the situation is. So maybe the severity is not that bad. I can add a comment, cat seen by. I can explain what the maybe situation was. I can type in any corrective actions. So maybe here it's, I saw a cat by the harvest bins. I'm going to clean and sanitize the harvest bins before I use them again, just in case, even though I already did that. I'm gonna so I can add in more information. I can add photos if necessary, but I'll save that and then continue going through. Is there standing water in the fields that could contaminate produce? No. And then here you'll see if a dangerous incident occurred, make sure you take appropriate actions to solve the problem, as detailed in your farm plan, and log on the dangerous incidents log. So I can record more information about the animal presence situation, or if there was standing water, I can expand on that in the dangerous incidents log, or I can just address it here by pressing the little paper icon. Next is the restroom cleaning checklist. So this is something that should be done each day or operation. Just quickly, if the restroom is in good and working order, do any supplies need to be restocked? I can say yes or no. If I say yes, for example, it'll prompt me to fill out this drop-down menu to say, okay, I need hand soap, paper towel, toilet paper. Then trash can emptied. So this is just the restroom log, super quick. Indicate whether today is a harvest day or not. If it's yes, I must complete a harvest log. I'll say no. Was today a delivery day? Answer yes or no, or NA if you're not an operation that delivers. And then was fertilizer applied today? Say no. Hit next. I can add my signature if I want. So I can say I'm a field manager, add my signature, save. You also don't need to put a signature on every record. It's something you can do if you want. It is a little bit of an overkill, so you can always just hit finish if you don't want to add a signature to each log. Then my app will sync, and that way I know, okay, my report has gone into the cloud, it's stored, it's organized, and I can then see it here. If you need to go back into a report and edit or change something, you can click on that report. You can review it, so add another signature. You can go back in and edit it if there is information you need to change or add on. So for example, if I wanted to add more detail about this cat that I saw next to my harvest bins, I can do that by editing my report. I can also share this report. So if I need to send this out to anybody specifically, I can share it with them, or I can just preview the report. So just look at, okay, this is what my completed report looks like. So all your reports that you complete, they'll appear on this first screen. You will notice that after several weeks, this will refresh. So don't be surprised if you don't have every single record you've ever created listed here. It's just cleared out to create space, and it's still stored for your operation on the dashboard side of things. So these will just be your most recently completed reports. So here in the general scope, I have all the records. that I need for the general scope of the harmonized GAP standard. Here I have my harvest log. Here's where you may want to add in more information about the specific location. So I can say I'm Hoe Farms. I can add a field. Maybe my field's just field A. If I have a section, I can add that. So really it can get as specific as you need for your operation. Maybe I'm super simple, I just go by fields, but I can break it down into sections, rows, blocks, however far I want to go. For now, I'll just say that. Maybe if I'm harvesting from multiple locations that day, I can add in multiple locations in this log. So I'm harvesting from A and B today. Hit next, and this is where it'll take you to the actual harvest log. It starts off with a pre-harvest assessment, which is just to go through the things that you need to check on before you actually get down and complete your harvest. So a field assessment, just looking over the field that you're about to harvest. Is there any signs of contamination? Maybe there's some flooding that needs to be addressed and I can't harvest a certain portion. I can document if there's any unauthorized access into the crop area, damage by animals, evidence of physical contamination. Make sure that if there are any contaminants that I document that I've taken them away and isolated them from the harvesting area. So I'll go through this. Yes, no. Most of the questions that we try to put on the logs are just simple yes or no or drop down answers to save time. And then you'll see we do have a few sections where you actually have to type out your responses. Going through that your harvesting equipment and containers are in good condition and stored properly. That your workers have washed their hands and they're not presenting symptoms of illness. And then again, that you're separating out any non-conforming product. Here, if you do use any pesticides that are restricted use or have pre-harvest intervals or re-entry intervals, making sure that you keep that in mind. If it's not applicable, you can hit NA. And this is an example of something that maybe your operation that uses no pesticides. And so when we work to customize your harvest record together, this is a question that we can just remove completely. So this is just kind of the template harvest log that we'll work on customizing with you. Then here, this is the crop selection, and this is where you're actually going to input the information of what you're harvesting, the quantity, the location that you're harvesting from, and any lot or tracking code information. So to do this, I hit start log. And the first thing is just selecting the crop that I'm harvesting. So here I can say cucumbers. I enter in the field or location. So if I don't put in the location information at the top of the log, I should enter it in here. So for this one, I'll say I'm harvesting from field A and maybe rows 2 and 4. However, you identify different locations on your farm. Next, I'm going to input the quantity in pounds. If you're an operation that grows microgreens, mushrooms, maybe you're not always harvesting in pounds, maybe it's ounces, or you measure your quantity in another metric, please let us know so we can edit this for you and make it applicable for your operation. But let's just say I harvested 20 pounds of cucumbers. And then lastly, lot and tracking code. this is something that we'll go over in more depth in a later class, talking about how to create a lock code or a tracking code if you don't have a system in place already at your operation. But for this example, I'm going to use the Julian date code. So today's Julian date is 25050. Then I could put, for example, my location information. So my code could be A for field A, and then 2/4 for my rows. And then lastly, it could be maybe a code for what the product was. So it could be C for cucumber, and then I may also want to put an indication for who the packer or who the harvester was. So I could have a code for myself. I was the harvester today. I'm going to put an F for Francesca. So like I said, we'll go more in depth through lock codes, tracking codes, and help you develop something that works for your operation if you don't have something already. So now I can hit save, and then I'll have my harvest information there. If I am harvesting multiple crops today, in this one harvest, I can add in additional information. So maybe I also harvested butternut squash. But I'll just do the Japanese cucumbers for now. So you can continue to add additional crops if there's multiple varieties or crops that you harvested. Next, it's moving into the pre-packing checklist. So I want to make sure that I washed and sanitized all food contact surfaces. I want to make sure that my packing containers are stored properly. They're covered, they're off the ground, they're free of contamination. Again, I am separating out any non-conforming product and I'm destroying it or discarding it. If I'm doing any post-harvest application of maybe I'm applying Sanidate to my wash water, I'm making sure that I'm verifying the rate that I'm adding in that Sanidate so it's not harmful to my product. And that's another place where you'd want an additional record to document, okay, I'm inputting this into my wash water. I need to document the amount that I'm adding in. And then packing station cleaning. So I can go through, I cleaned and sanitized my surfaces when I was done. The floor is clean, trash empty, and supplies are restocked. Hit finish. I can add a signature or just hit finish again, and the app will sync. So now you can see I have my 2 logs that I completed today. If I go back to my little menu, I can also see field scope. So again, there's nothing here because I haven't created any reports. If I hit the plus button though, I can see the different options for reports in this section. Over here as well, you can see the to-do list, which is something you need to set up on the dashboard side, but you'll see I have set up a to-do list. So each day it's gonna prompt me to complete my daily gap and restroom cleaning checklist. So this is a quick way that you can kind of remind yourself, prompt yourself to complete the necessary records. Settings, making sure that you're using the most updated version of the app. Mess with the font size, change the language if you need to. And then binders. This will be empty for you guys right now. You can share specific documents from the dashboard side if you want to have them appear in the app. This is where they would appear. But again, the main places that you guys will be focusing on is the actual scopes with the records. Does anybody have questions for the app side of things right now? One of the parts of the homework this week is to just log into your account and kind of create some records on the app. Don't worry about things being perfect this time around. Like I said, we're going to be customizing stuff for you guys as we work through it. So really this week, the idea is just make sure everyone's able to log in and complete records, even if you're just kind of messing around at this point.
Questions?
Yeah.
Um, if you have multiple users using the same app
Mhm.
on the farm, do they all use the same username and password or separate passwords, or is there a way that you track the who is making the particular entries?
Yeah, so it can be done a few ways. We have some farms that have separate logins for separate employees. Um, and then we also have some farms that have just one login, um, and they all just share that one account. In that case, we normally create a drop-down list where at the beginning of the log, they can select their name from that list. So it's clear, okay, Chess completed this log or Lisa completed this log. So that's if they don't have their own individual accounts. But it can work both ways. It's kind of your preference as an operation.
So that's something we customize with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Visitors log. Are you dealing with that today, or is that something in the future?
Um, I can open the visitors log real quick.
Well, I was just going to ask you here, what goes in the visitors log? You know,
Yeah.
our home is on our farm.
Mm,
So does every time we have family members stay with us, do I put them down every day? Do I have people come over for dinner? Do I put them down every day? My wife has a art studio. Does every time somebody comes to see the art studio, when she has an annual tour through and we get 100 people through, do we put all 100 people down on it?
yeah.
Do we put UPS and FedEx every time they come on? So what's included and what's not included in the visitor log?
Yeah. Definitely not all that, so don't worry. You won't have to record every time someone comes steps onto your property. But if it's a visitor who is going to be maybe like volunteering or like walking through your fields in the packing area, or doing anything that could impact food safety, kind of up to your discretion, um, it should be recorded. Another thing that's important to be recorded is any service providers that are coming on site. So if I have a portable Lua and it's serviced weekly, I don't need to record the service provider coming on site weekly, but at least once I need to document that they know my policies, they know where to wash their hands, they know to not bring glass into the harvesting fields, stuff like that. So it's kind
So,
of something that should be up to your discretion, but since your home is on your farm site, it definitely doesn't need to be all visitors to your house.
okay. Um, Veritiv delivers me a pallet of packing boxes. Record that?
Are they just dropping that off and leaving, or are they
Yes.
coming onto your
They-
um yeah, I would say no, but where we would record that is we would just record that that's a material that you're getting from an outside source. But if they're not actually coming onto your farm and doing any activities going into your pack shed, I would say no.
Workers are not considered visitors, so every time I have workers come and work on the farm, I don't
Yeah,
record who they are.
no.
Okay. Let's talk about animals. You know, this is a rural area.
Yeah,
I got wild turkeys, they're here every day. I've got pheasants here every day. I've got guinea hens here every day. I got well, we try to keep the mongoose out, but you know, the rats and mice are in the fields. We know that.
yeah,
I've got all kinds of nolies and geckos. What goes on the animal report and what doesn't?
yeah. So animals, they're everywhere. You should document them if there's like a huge infestation of rodents or something that should definitely be documented and taken care of with a pest control company or however you want to. Um, the initial assessment that we do for animals is a larger risk assessment, which is something that you'll do kind of one-on-one with one of our food safety specialists. And that's where we kind of look at animal activity at your operation as a whole. So if you have like livestock that you keep at your farm, or maybe a family pet that you keep at your farm, we'll document that in the risk assessment and then use that risk assessment to determine the appropriate frequency to be recording these things, monitoring these things. Like if
Okay,
I
so
have
it's variance from the risk assessment.
yeah, variance from
Okay.
the risk assessment.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anything else right now? I'm sure as you guys start playing around with this, more questions will come. Um, but I can move on from the app now. Okay. Oh, I see something in the chat. Okay.
I think that was Liz. She had to leave.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna switch back my screens. Okay. Are we all back on the slide presentation now? Okay, cool. So quick demo of that. For on the dashboard side of things, like in the harvest log, you saw the big drop down list of crops. You should have some crops already added to your account. We just pulled them from whatever you listed on your application. But you don't have all your extensive list of crops on the Heavy Connect dashboard yet. I'll go over how to add them, or you can send your full crop list out and we can add them for you. Since what time are we at? Running a little bit out of time, I'm gonna switch over to just the binder dashboard stuff right now. So let me switch to another screen. Okay. Are you guys able to see this dashboard where I'm at now?
We just see your
Okay.
slide. There we go.
Okay, cool. So I'm now on the dashboard side of Heavy Connect. The login information is the same for the app as it is on the dashboard, so you'll log in the same way. So when just gonna update this so I can see what I just did on the app side. So the dashboard is where we actually make any customizations that are needed, and where we can review reports, and it's also where we store the other documentation that's required for an audit. So when your farm food safety plan has been completed and your risk assessment documentation has been completed, it'll all live on Heavy Connect. It's kind of like a Google Drive or Google Workspace, but just for food safety needs. So here on the dashboard, I'm logged into the same account that I just completed my last records on. So I can see the harvest log and daily GAP checklist that I completed earlier today. This is on the inspector tab. What I'm going to go over today, though, is your binders. So your Heavy Connect binders is, again, where we keep a lot of the additional documentation that's required for the audit. So we'll put your farm food safety plan, your operations map, a water distribution system map, your master document, which will list out any service providers you have, your inventory of equipment, tools, and utensils, a list of any alternative growing material or media if you use that, and then an ag chemical inventory. So your pesticides, fertilizers, cleaning and sanitizing agents. If you are doing the post-harvest scope, we'll put any cleaning, sanitizing, and maintenance schedules that you have, a glass and brittle plastic inventory, and then any supplemental documents and supporting documents. So, for example, if you get your water tested, we'll upload the results to the Heavy Connect binders so they can be stored and shared out. So when you log in and explore your Heavy Connect account, you'll just see one binder right now, and that's a binder that's been shared from North Shore EVP. So you'll see sharing North Shore EVP. If I click on that, then I'll actually see my farms binder, what's shared. Right now, I just have one thing shared in here, which is just a document, and it's a template email for a mock recall exercise. But eventually, as you guys gather a bunch of your documentation, it'll all be stored here. And this is so we have access to it as your food safety specialists and as auditors. It's also for when you do, or if you are selected for an external audit, we share a login with the auditor so they're able to log into your Heavy Connect dashboard side and see what's in your binders and look at your completed records. You can also create your own folders and upload your own files here if you need to or want to by hitting the new button. I can upload files. I can create a folder. Scheduler module, this is where I can add in assignments on my to-do list, like I showed you guys on the app. So there's a lot of functions that Heavy Connect has. Not all of them are ones that you guys necessarily need to use. So for example, the scheduler module, where I can input assignments for myself, isn't a requirement. So you can really get super fancy with Heavy Connect and like give yourself automations and a lot of customizations. That's one way of using it. You can also just stick to the basics. I'm only gonna do the records that are required for my certification. So it's really up to you kind of how tech savvy you are and then how into the customizations you are, customizations you want to get into. But we'll help you with customization. So for example, crop builder here under settings, will help you input new crops if you need to. But for this week, really the goal is to just start exploring Heavy Connect, make sure that you guys are able to log in, see the reports, and start thinking about what customizations you might need or want. Okay. Back to the slideshow. So now, perfect, we're almost at the end of class. And today we have some homework for you guys. So homework number 2 is, again, it's a Google form, just like homework 1, and it's on Google Classrooms. If you haven't been able to access Google Classrooms or complete the homework yet, please reach out to us. You should have received an invitation to join the classroom. If you were unable to, for whatever reason, we got to figure out some way around that. So please reach out if you have not joined the classroom yet. And if you haven't completed homework 1, you should expect one of us to reach out to you shortly about that homework assignment. Next part of the homework, if you haven't already, download the Heavy Connect app to your phone and start playing around in there. Again, if you haven't received your login information, you will receive it by the end of today. And in addition to the app, take a look at the dashboard website. So on your computer or web browser, same login, just take a time to explore. And then lastly, as part of the homework, we're asking everybody to complete at least 4 practice logs on the Heavy Connect app. These are just examples of ones that you can try out. So try out a daily gap and restroom cleaning checklist, complete an employee training log, or do a cleaning and sanitizing log. So really just mess around. Don't worry about things being accurate or perfect right now. We're not going to be auditing these particular logs, so it's really just for you guys to get comfortable. Okay. Any questions on all of that? Hey, I'm gonna take the awkward silence as a no. And um, if you do think of something, of course, email, text, or however you want. And if not, we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Same time, same place next week.
Thank you.